The ballroom doors swung open, and 200 wedding guests turned to stare. Ryan Dalton froze at the altar. His bride stopped mid-step down the aisle. Because the woman standing in the doorway wasn't supposed to look like this. 6 weeks ago he had thrown her into a blizzard with their newborn daughter. 6 weeks ago he had laughed while his mistress spat in her face. But now she was wearing diamonds. Real ones. And the two men standing behind her? They were lawyers. What Ryan didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have known, was that the broken woman he discarded was about to reveal exactly who she really was. And it would destroy everything. The snow was falling like a death sentence. Thick, heavy, relentless. Each flake landed on Clare Morrison Dalton's shoulders like a tiny cold blade, melting into the thin fabric of her worn winter coat, the same jacket she had bought 3 years ago when money was tight, and Ryan had told her they couldn't afford anything better. She stood on the front porch of the house she had called home for 7 years. Her arms were wrapped around a bundle of blankets. Inside those blankets was Emma. 3 weeks old. 7 pounds of warmth and innocence, utterly unaware that her father had just thrown them both out into a December blizzard. Clare's fingers were already going numb. Her legs trembled, not just from the cold, but from the shock that was still rippling through her body like aftershocks from an earthquake. She could hear Ryan's voice through the door. He was on the phone, laughing, talking about wedding venues, discussing catering options with Vanessa, the woman who, less than 10 minutes ago, had walked up to Clare in her own kitchen and spat directly in her face. And Ryan had laughed. He had actually laughed while his wife wiped another woman's spit off her cheek. That sound, that cruel, casual laughter, echoed in Clare's skull now as the wind sliced through her body. She looked down at Emma, at her tiny pink face scrunched up against the cold, and something inside Clare cracked. Not broken. Not yet. But cracked. Like ice before it shatters. But Clare didn't know the most essential part of this nightmare yet. She didn't know about the letter sitting on her kitchen counter, the one she never got to open, the one that would have changed everything if Ryan had given her just 5 more minutes. That letter had arrived 3 days ago. It came in a crisp white envelope with a law firm's return address printed in the corner. Peterson, Harrison and Associates, attorneys at law. Clare had set it aside. She meant to open it. She really did. But Emma had been colicky that week, screaming for hours every night, and Clare hadn't slept more than 2 hours at a time since giving birth. Her brain was foggy. Her body was exhausted. And a letter from some law firm about her dead grandmother's estate? It could wait. Or so she thought. Eleanor Morrison, Clare's grandmother, had died 6 months ago. A heart attack. Sudden. No warning. Clare had been 6 months pregnant when she got the call, and she had attended the funeral alone because Ryan said he couldn't take time off work. She had sat in that funeral home with her hands resting on her swollen belly, tears streaming down her face, wishing more than anything that her grandmother could have lived long enough to meet Emma. Eleanor had been the only family Clare had left. Her father had died when she was 12. Her mother had passed 3 years ago. And now Eleanor was gone too. Clare had no one. No one except Ryan. And Ryan, it turned out, had stopped being hers a long time ago. But what Clare didn't know, what she couldn't possibly have known as she stood shivering on that porch, was that her grandmother had been hiding a secret. A massive, world-shaking secret. And that letter on the kitchen counter? It was about to reveal everything. Ryan Dalton watched his wife through the frosted glass of the front door. He could see her shape, hunched, shaking, pathetic. He felt nothing. Actually, that wasn't true. He felt relief. For months he had been dreading this moment. The confrontation. The tears. The guilt. But now that it was happening, it felt easy. Cling. Like ripping off a bandage. Clare had been dead weight for years. She had gained so much weight during the pregnancy. 60 pounds. Her body had become something he didn't recognize, something he didn't want. He was always tired. Always covered in spit-up. Always sighing, always sad, always needing something from him. And then Vanessa had walked into his life. 26 years old. Blonde. Beautiful. Vanessa made him feel like a man again. She made him feel wanted, desired, alive. Vanessa didn't ask him to change diapers or wake up for night feedings. Vanessa didn't cry about her dead grandmother or worry about savings accounts. Vanessa was fire. Clare was ash. So Ryan had made his choice. That morning, before Claire even woke up, he had transferred all $15,000 from their joint savings account into an account that only he could access. Every cent they had. The money they had saved for Emma's future. The money they had put aside for emergencies. Gone. Now it would pay for his wedding to Vanessa. It would pay for the venue, the cake, the flowers, and the champagne fountain Vanessa wanted. Claire didn't deserve that money anyway. She hadn't earned it. She had just existed. And existing wasn't enough anymore. Ryan turned away from the door, from the shape of his shivering wife and crying baby, and walked back into the warm kitchen where Vanessa was waiting. She smiled at him. That perfect, dazzling smile. "Is she gone?" Vanessa asked. "She's going." "Good." Vanessa wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him. And Ryan kissed her back, feeling absolutely nothing for the woman freezing outside. But what Ryan didn't see, what he wouldn't discover until it was far too late, was the envelope sitting on the counter behind Vanessa's head. The one addressed to Clare Morrison Dalton. The one from Peterson, Harrison and Associates. The one that would eventually destroy everything he was building. Claire started walking. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she couldn't stand on that porch anymore, staring at the door of a house that was no longer hers. Her boots crunched through the fresh snow. The cold was so intense it felt like burning. Emma whimpered against her chest, and Claire pulled the baby closer, trying to share what little body heat she had left. "It's okay," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "It's okay, baby girl. Mommy's going to figure this out." But how? Claire had nothing. No money. No car. Ryan had taken her keys, claiming the car was in his name. No phone. He had cancelled their family plan, and her device was now a useless brick in her pocket. No family. No friends. Years of isolation had made sure of that. Ryan had never liked it when she spent time with other people. He would pout when she made plans without him. He would sulk when she talked about meeting up with old college friends. Slowly, year by year, Claire had pulled away from everyone. She had let those friendships die. And now she had no one to call. Even if she had a working phone. The snow fell harder. Claire's tears froze on her cheeks. She thought about her grandmother then. About Eleanor. The older woman had been sharp-eyed and fierce, even into her 70s. She had raised Claire after her father died, using tough love and unflinching honesty. Eleanor had always said the same thing whenever Claire faced hardship. "The Morrison women don't break. We wait. We watch. And we win." Claire had always thought it was just something grandmothers said. Comfort words. Pep talk phrases. But now, walking through a blizzard with her newborn baby, Claire realized something. She wasn't broken. Not yet. She was cracked. She was hurting. But she was still standing. She was still walking. And somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the pain and the fear and the humiliation, a tiny ember was beginning to glow. Not hope. Not yet. Something harder. Something colder. Something that felt a lot like fury. But Claire didn't know the most important thing yet. She didn't know that in 6 short weeks, she would walk into Ryan's wedding wearing diamonds and carrying proof that would shatter his entire world. The women's shelter was 3 miles away. Claire had seen signs for it before. A simple placard on the side of a church advertising safe beds for women in crisis. She had never imagined she would need it. But here she was, walking through a blizzard, holding her daughter, praying that she could make it 3 miles before the cold took them both. Her body screamed with every step. She was only 3 weeks postpartum. Her stitches still pulled. Her muscles still ached from labor. And now she was forcing herself through snow that came up to her knees, her arms burning from carrying Emma, her lungs struggling against the icy air. 1 mile. Then the world became nothing but white noise and pain. Claire's mind went blank. She stopped thinking about Ryan. She stopped thinking about Vanessa. She stopped thinking about anything except the next step. Left foot. Right foot. Keep moving. Don't stop. If you stop, you die. If you stop, Emma dies. Keep moving. Somewhere in the 2nd mile, Claire started talking to Emma. "Your great-grandmother would be so mad at me right now," she said through chattering teeth. "She would say I should have seen this coming. She would say I was too trusting." Emma didn't respond. She was sleeping now, her tiny body warm against Claire's chest. "But I'm going to fix this," Claire continued. "I don't know how yet, but I'm going to fix it. I'm going to make sure you never feel this cold again. I'm going to make sure no one ever hurts you the way your father hurt me. And then through the swirling snow Clare saw it. A light. A building. A sign that read, Hope House Women's Shelter. He had made it. 3 miles through a blizzard with a newborn and she had made it. Clare stumbled through the front door and collapsed into the arms of a woman named Patricia, who wrapped her in blankets and took Emma to check her temperature. And for the first time in hours, Clare let herself cry. But she didn't know yet, couldn't possibly know, that this shelter, this moment of rock bottom, was actually the beginning of something extraordinary. Because tomorrow Clare would borrow a phone. And she would call the law firm that sent that letter. And what she learned in that phone call would change everything. The phone call changed everything. Clare's hands were still shaking when Patricia, the shelter director, handed her a borrowed cell phone the next morning. She had slept on a thin mattress in a room with 3 other women, all of them escaping something, all of them carrying invisible wounds. Emma had slept too, fed with formula from the shelter, warm and safe for the first time since leaving that house. Clare had stared at the ceiling all night, thinking, planning, remembering, and somewhere around 3 a.m. she had remembered the letter. The one from the law firm. The one she never opened. The one that was probably still sitting on the kitchen counter in the house Ryan had stolen from her. So when morning came, Clare didn't call the police. She didn't call a divorce lawyer. She called Peterson, Harrison and Associates. The receptionist answered on the second ring. Peterson, Harrison and Associates, how may I direct your call? Clare's voice was hoarse from crying, rough from the cold that still lingered in her chest. My name is Clare Morrison Dalton. I received a letter about my grandmother's estate. Eleanor Morrison. There was a pause. Then the receptionist's tone changed completely. Mrs. Dalton. Please hold. I'm transferring you directly to Mr. Peterson. Clare frowned. Directly to a senior partner? For a simple estate matter? That seemed unusual. But before she could think too hard about it, a deep, professional voice came on the line. Mrs. Dalton. This is Robert Peterson. I've been trying to reach you for 2 weeks. Are you safe? The question caught Clare off guard. Yes. I'm at a shelter. My husband, my ex-husband, he threw me out yesterday. I just had a baby 3 weeks ago and I don't have access to anything. My phone, my money, my... Mrs. Dalton. Robert Peterson's voice was calm but urgent. I need you to listen very carefully. What I'm about to tell you is going to sound unbelievable. But I assure you every word is true. Clare gripped the phone tighter. Her heart started beating faster. Your grandmother, Eleanor Margaret Morrison, was not who you thought she was. Robert Peterson's story took nearly an hour. Clare sat in the shelter's small office, the door closed, Emma sleeping in a donated bassinet beside her, and listened as her entire understanding of her life collapsed and rebuilt itself. Eleanor Morrison had been born into one of the wealthiest manufacturing families in America. Morrison Manufacturing, founded in 1932, had built industrial components for factories, military contracts and infrastructure projects across the country. By the 1990s, the company was worth nearly $1 billion. And Eleanor was the sole heir. But in 1995 something happened. Robert Peterson wouldn't give Clare all the details. He said Eleanor had kept some things private even from her attorneys. But there had been a tragedy. A family loss so devastating that Eleanor had walked away from everything. She had left the company in the hands of a trust. She had moved to a tiny apartment in Queens. She had lived quietly, invisibly. And she had raised Clare after Clare's father died, never once mentioning that she was sitting on a fortune that had been growing for 30 years. Why? Clare whispered into the phone. Why wouldn't she tell me? Robert Peterson's voice softened. Your grandmother had her reasons, Mrs. Dalton. She was afraid that money would corrupt you, the way she believed it had corrupted others in her family. She wanted you to grow up understanding hard work, understanding struggle. And she put a condition on the inheritance. Clare held her breath. What condition? The full inheritance would only be released when you had a child of your own. Eleanor wanted to make sure the Morrison fortune went to someone who understood family. Someone who understood loyalty. Someone who would protect the next generation. Clare looked at Emma. At her tiny daughter sleeping peacefully, unaware that her birth had just made her mother one of the wealthiest women in America. Mrs. Dalton, Robert Peterson continued, as of the birth of your daughter Emma, You are the sole beneficiary of the Morrison Family Trust. The current assessed value of the trust, including all assets, properties, stock holdings, and controlling shares in Morrison Manufacturing and its subsidiaries, is approximately $2.8 billion. The phone nearly slipped from Claire's fingers. Billion. With AB. She had spent last night on a shelter mattress. She had walked 3 miles through a blizzard with nothing but the clothes on her back. Her husband had stolen $15,000 from her and called it a victory. And she was worth $2.8 billion. The irony was so sharp it could have drawn blood. Robert Peterson arrived at the shelter 3 hours later. He came in a black Mercedes with tinted windows, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Claire's entire wardrobe. 2 assistants followed behind him, carrying boxes of documents. The shelter staff stared. The other women in residence whispered. But Claire didn't notice any of it. She was too busy signing papers. Page after page after page. Transfer documents. Trust amendments. Corporate authorizations. Bank account setups. By the end of the day, Clare Morrison Dalton had access to a checking account with $50 million in it. A starter fund, Robert Peterson called it, while the larger trust assets were being organized. $50 million. Sitting in an account with her name on it. Claire stared at the banking app on the new phone Robert Peterson had given her. A phone registered to a new private number, untraceable by Ryan or anyone else. The numbers on the screen didn't feel real. None of this felt real. Mrs. Dalton, Robert Peterson said as he packed up his briefcase, I want you to understand something. Your grandmother spent 30 years protecting this fortune. Growing it. Preparing it for you. She believed in you. He paused, his sharp eyes studying her face. The question now is, what will you do with it? Claire thought about Ryan. About Vanessa. About the spit dripping down her cheek while her husband laughed. About the text message she had received last night before her old phone died. That cruel photo of Ryan and Vanessa kissing with the words, "Thanks for the wedding fund, fatty. Enjoy the streets." She thought about the $15,000 he had stolen. About the house he had locked her out of. About the wedding he was planning it with her money. And she thought about her grandmother's favorite saying. The words Eleanor had repeated throughout Claire's childhood. The words that had kept Claire walking through that blizzard when every muscle in her body screamed at her to stop. The Morrison women don't break. We wait. We watch. And we win. Claire looked at Robert Peterson. I want to know everything, she said. Every company my grandmother owned. Every property. Every investment. Every connection. Robert Peterson smiled. It was a small smile, but it was knowing. I was hoping you'd say that. But Claire wasn't done. And I want to know one more thing. Yes. Claire's eyes went cold. I want to know if my grandmother's holdings include any ownership stake in the Riverside Plaza Ballroom. The one on the waterfront. Robert Peterson raised an eyebrow. The Riverside Plaza? I believe we do own the parent company that operates that venue. Why do you ask? Claire's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Because that's where my husband is planning to marry his mistress in 6 weeks. And I think I'd like to attend. The next 6 weeks were a war. A silent, invisible, meticulously planned war. Claire moved out of the shelter after 3 days. But not before writing a check for $500,000 to Hope House. Enough to fund their operations for the next 5 years. Patricia, the director, had cried when she saw the amount. You were only here for 2 nights, she said, her voice breaking. Why would you do this? Claire had looked around at the other women. The tired faces, the haunted eyes, the babies crying in donated bassinets. And she had thought about how close she came to being one of them permanently. Because no one should have to walk 3 miles through a blizzard to find safety, Claire said. And because someone helped me when I had nothing. I won't forget that. She moved into a hotel suite that night. A penthouse at one of the most exclusive hotels in Manhattan. Emma had her own room. A private nanny was hired within 48 hours. A kind woman named Maria, with impeccable references and a gentle touch that made Emma coo with happiness. And Claire? Claire got to work. She hired a personal trainer. Not because she believed the cruel things Ryan and Vanessa had said about her body, but because she wanted to feel strong. She wanted to walk into that wedding looking like a weapon. The weight started coming off. Not through starvation or crash diets, but through movement. Through purpose. through the burning rage that fueled her through every workout, every meal, every sleepless night. He hired a stylist, a woman named Dominique, who took one look at Claire's worn clothes and said, "Honey, we're going to make them choke on their own tongues." Designer dresses arrived. Shoes that cost more than Ryan's monthly salary. Jewelry, real diamonds, real emeralds, genuine sapphires, explicitly selected to catch the light and command attention. Claire looked in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. The woman staring back at her was sharp, polished, powerful. But it wasn't just about appearance. Claire spent hours every day with Robert Peterson and his team, learning about Morrison manufacturing. Learning about the companies her grandmother had quietly acquired over 30 years. Learning about the web of investments, subsidiaries, and partnerships that made up her new empire. And learning about Ryan's marketing firm. That was where things got interesting. Ryan's firm, Harrison Creative Partners, had one major client that accounted for nearly 40% of their revenue. A logistics company called Northbridge Shipping. Claire had never heard of Northbridge Shipping before. But Robert Peterson had. "Northbridge was acquired by your grandmother in 2018, he explained during one of their marathon strategy sessions. "It's a subsidiary of Morrison Holdings. We own 100% of it." Claire stared at him. "So I own the company that pays most of my husband's salary?" "Technically, yes." "And if that company decided to take their marketing business elsewhere?" Robert Peterson's smile was thin and sharp. "Then Harrison Creative Partners would lose their biggest client. They'd have to lay off staff. Possibly close their doors entirely." Claire nodded slowly. "Good to know." But she didn't make that call. Not yet. She wanted Ryan to walk into his wedding believing he had won. She wanted him to stand at that altar, confident and smug, thinking he had escaped his boring wife and started a glamorous new life. And then she wanted to burn it all down in front of everyone he knew. But Claire didn't know yet, couldn't possibly have known, that Ryan had already discovered the letter. And he was starting to panic. Ryan found the letter 2 days after kicking Claire out. He was cleaning up the kitchen. Or rather, he was watching Vanessa clean up the kitchen while he scrolled through his phone, when his eyes landed on the envelope. It was sitting next to the toaster. Crisp white paper. A law firm's return address in the corner. Addressed to Claire Morrison Dalton. Ryan picked it up without thinking. He turned it over in his hands. Vanessa was talking about something, wedding colors maybe, or tablecloth options, but her voice faded into background noise as Ryan stared at the envelope. Peterson, Harrison and Associates, attorneys at law. Something cold slithered through his gut. Attorneys didn't send letters unless something important was happening. And this letter was about Claire's grandmother. The older woman who had died 6 months ago. The one Claire had cried about for weeks, while Ryan had rolled his eyes and told her to move on. Ryan knew he shouldn't open it. It was addressed to Claire, not him. Legally it was a crime. But Claire was gone. And this was still his house. And besides, what could an older woman from Queens possibly have left behind that mattered? Ryan tore open the envelope. The letter was short, formal. The kind of language lawyers used when they wanted to sound important without saying much. But 3 words jumped off the page and grabbed Ryan by the throat. Primary beneficiary. Estate. Distribution of assets. Ryan read the letter 3 times. Then he reread it. His heart was beating faster now. A strange heat was creeping up his neck. "Ryan." Vanessa's voice cut through his focus. "Ryan, are you even listening to me? I asked about the centerpieces." "Not now." He didn't even look at her. His eyes were locked on those 3 words. Primary beneficiary. Estate. Distribution of assets. Eleanor Morrison had been Claire's grandmother. An older woman in a small apartment. That's what Claire had always said. That's what Ryan had always believed. But law firms didn't send formal estate letters for people who had nothing. Law firms sent letters like this when real money was involved. Ryan pulled out his phone and opened Google. His fingers were trembling slightly as he typed. Eleanor Margaret Morrison. The first few results were obituaries. Condolence messages. Nothing unusual. But then Ryan scrolled deeper. And that's when he found the article that would keep him awake for the next 6 weeks. The headline was from 1995. A business journal. The kind of publication Ryan would never usually read. But the words hit him like a sledgehammer to the chest. Morrison heiress walks away from fortune after family tragedy. Ryan clicked the link. His mouth went dry. The article was brief, just a few paragraphs, but every sentence was a bomb exploding in his brain. Eleanor Morrison, 45, sole heir to the Morrison manufacturing fortune, valued at approximately $800 million, has reportedly walked away from her inheritance following a series of personal tragedies. $800 million. In 1995, Ryan's hands were shaking so severely that he almost dropped his phone. He forced himself to keep reading. Sources close to the family indicate that Morrison, devastated by recent losses, has resigned from the company board and has relinquished active management of her assets to a trust. A trust. The money wasn't gone. It had been sitting in a trust for 30 years. Growing. Compounding. Becoming something even bigger. Ryan did the math in his head. $800 million in 1995. 30 years of investment growth. Stock market gains. Real estate appreciation. Corporate expansion. Even with conservative estimates, that money could have doubled 3 or 4 times. Which meant Eleanor Morrison's estate was now worth. Ryan couldn't even finish the thought. He felt like he was going to be sick. Vanessa finally noticed something was wrong. "Ryan, what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." Ryan stared at her. At her perfect blonde hair. At her expensive manicure. At the engagement ring on her finger. The ring he had bought with money stolen from Claire's joint account. And he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Fear. Real fear. "I need to make a phone call," he said. His voice sounded strange. Hollow. "What?" "Ryan, we're supposed to be going over the seating chart. Later." He walked out of the kitchen without looking back. His legs felt like they were made of concrete. His mind was racing at 1,000 miles per hour. He had thrown Clare out into a blizzard. He had stolen her money. He had laughed while Vanessa spat in her face. And now he was discovering that Clare, the woman he had discarded like trash, might be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Maybe more. Ryan pulled up the law firm's phone number and dialed. His palms were sweating. The phone rang twice before a receptionist answered. "Peterson, Harrison and Associates. How may I help you?" "Yes, I'm calling about a letter regarding Eleanor Morrison's estate. My name is Ryan Dalton." Are you Clare Morrison Dalton?" "No, I'm her husband. Well, ex-husband. I'm sorry, sir." The receptionist's voice was polite but firm. "We can only discuss estate matters with the named beneficiary. If Mrs. Dalton wishes to contact us, she's welcome to call directly. But I need to know about the inheritance. How much is?" "Sir, I cannot discuss confidential client information with anyone except Mrs. Dalton herself. Have a good day." The line went dead. Ryan stared at his phone. His reflection stared back at him from the dark screen. Pale, sweating, terrified. He had made a mistake. A catastrophic, irreversible mistake. And he had no idea how to fix it. The next 6 weeks were torture for Ryan Dalton. On the surface, everything looked perfect. Vanessa was planning the wedding of her dreams. Flowers were ordered. Invitations were sent. The Riverside Plaza ballroom was booked. $8,000 just for the venue, not including catering or the open bar Vanessa insisted upon. The $15,000 Ryan had stolen from Clare evaporated in the first 2 weeks. Then the credit cards came out. Then the personal loans. Then the desperate phone call to his parents, lying about needing money for a car down payment. The debt piled up like snow in a blizzard. $20,000, then $30,000, then $50,000. Every time Ryan tried to slow down the spending, Vanessa would pout. She would cry. She would accuse him of not loving her enough. "This is our special day," she would say, her voice dripping with honey and manipulation. "Don't you want everyone to see how happy we are?" And Ryan would give in. He always gave in. But at night, when Vanessa was asleep beside him, Ryan would lie awake in the dark and think about Clare. About that letter. About the Morrison fortune. He tried to find her. He really did. He drove to the women's shelter 3 miles from their house. The one he remembered seeing signs for. But when he asked about Clare Morrison Dalton, the woman at the front desk had looked at him with cold, knowing eyes. "We don't give out information about our residents," she said. "For their safety." Her emphasis on that last word made Ryan's face burn with shame. He tried Claire's old phone number. Disconnected. He tried her email. Bounce back. He checked her social media accounts. silent. It was like Clare had vanished from the face of the earth. And Ryan was left to wonder, to obsess, over what she was doing. Whether she knew about the inheritance yet. Whether she had contacted the lawyers. Whether she was, at this very moment, becoming the kind of wealth that made Ryan's financial problems look like pocket change. The not knowing was driving him insane. 3 weeks before the wedding, Vanessa made a suggestion that changed everything. They were sitting in the living room, Clare's old living room with Clare's old furniture, which Vanessa had been slowly replacing with more expensive pieces. When Vanessa looked up from her wedding magazine with a gleam in her eye. "I just had the best idea," she said. Ryan looked at her warily. Vanessa's best ideas usually cost money he didn't have. "We should invite Clare to the wedding." Ryan's blood went cold. "What? Clare? Your ex-wife?" Vanessa smiled, and there was something cruel in it. "I want her to see us together. I want her to see what she lost." "Vanessa, I don't think." "Oh, come on." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Don't tell me you still care about her feelings. She's probably sitting in some dumpy apartment right now, crying over you while she changes diapers. Let her see us in the Riverside Plaza. Let her see the champagne fountain and the designer cake and the 200 guests. Let her see that we won." Ryan's mind was racing. On one hand, this was wild. Inviting Clare to the wedding was pouring salt in an open wound. It wasn't kind. It was petty. It was precisely the kind of thing Vanessa would suggest. But on the other hand, if Clare came to the wedding, Ryan could talk to her. He could apologize. He could explain. He could try to get back into her good graces before she realized, if she hadn't already, exactly how much money she was about to inherit. It was manipulation. Pure and simple. But Ryan was desperate. And desperate men did desperate things. "I'll handle it," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "I'll send her an invitation." Vanessa clapped her hands together, delighted. "Perfect. I can't wait to see her face when she walks in and sees everything we've built." Ryan nodded, already composing the message in his head. He would make it sound friendly. Apologetic. He would mention Emma. Use the baby as an excuse for wanting to stay civil. He would sound like the reasonable, mature ex-husband who just wanted everyone to move forward peacefully. And Clare, soft, trusting Clare, would believe him. She always believed him. But Ryan didn't know the woman Clare had become in those 6 weeks. He didn't know about the transformation, the training, the planning. He didn't know that Clare had been waiting for precisely this invitation, that she had been hoping for it, counting on it, building her entire revenge strategy around it. And he definitely didn't know that Clare already owned the building where his wedding was taking place. The invitation arrived through a mutual acquaintance. Clare was in her hotel penthouse when her phone buzzed with the forwarded message. She read it slowly. Every word, every carefully crafted sentence is designed to sound sincere while hiding Ryan's true motives. "Clare, I know things ended badly between us, but I hope we can be mature about this situation. Vanessa and I are getting married, and for Emma's sake, it would be good if we could all move forward peacefully. I want to invite you to our wedding as a gesture of goodwill. It would mean a lot to both of us if you could come. Please know that I wish you well and I hope you're doing okay." Clare laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. Nothing like the warm laughter she used to have during happier times. This was the laugh of a woman who had been underestimated. The laugh of a woman who was about to prove everyone wrong. "For Emma's sake," she read aloud, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "He threw Emma into a blizzard 3 weeks after she was born, and now he wants to do things for Emma's sake." She looked across the room at Maria, the nanny who was rocking Emma in her arms. Emma was healthy now. Growing. Thriving. He had the best doctors, the best care, the best of everything. Because Clare had made sure of it. Clare typed her response. 3 words. Simple. Direct. "I'll be there." She hit send. And then she picked up her phone and called Robert Peterson. "It's time," she said. "I want to move forward with everything we discussed. The venue. The lawsuits. The acquisition." "Are you sure, Mrs. Dalton?" Robert Peterson's voice was calm and professional. "Once we begin, there's no going back." Clare thought about the blizzard. About the spit on her cheek. About Ryan's laughter echoing in her ears. About the text message. "Thanks for the wedding fund, fatty. Enjoy the streets." "I'm sure," she said. "Then consider it done. By the time you walk into that wedding, everything will be in place." Claire hung up the phone. She walked to the window of her penthouse and looked out at the Manhattan skyline. The city that now felt like hers, spread out before her like a kingdom waiting to be claimed. 6 weeks ago she had been nobody. A discarded wife. A burden. A punchline. Now she was about to become the most powerful person Ryan Dalton had ever met. And he had no idea what was coming. The morning of the wedding arrived like a guillotine blade dropping. Ryan woke at 5:47 a.m., his eyes snapping open in the darkness. Vanessa was still asleep beside him, her breathing slow and even, her face peaceful. She had no idea what was coming. Neither did Ryan really. But he felt it. A heaviness in his chest. A tightness in his throat. A sense of dread that had been building for weeks now sat on his ribs like a stone. He slipped out of bed and walked to the bathroom, careful not to wake Vanessa. The mirror showed him a man he barely recognized. Dark circles under his eyes. A tightness around his mouth. The look of someone who hadn't slept properly in 6 weeks. Ryan splashed cold water on his face and tried to shake off the feeling. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. He was marrying Vanessa. The beautiful, exciting, passionate woman who had pulled him out of his boring marriage and shown him what life could be. He should be thrilled. He should be celebrating. Instead, he felt like he was walking toward a cliff edge in the dark. But Ryan told himself it was just nerves. Just normal pre-wedding jitters. Claire would come, he would apologize to her quietly, and maybe, just maybe, he could start repairing whatever damage had been done. He had no idea that Claire had already set every trap. And he was about to walk directly into all of them. The Riverside Plaza ballroom was stunning. Even Ryan had to admit that. The venue occupied the entire top floor of a waterfront building, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor. Morning sunlight streamed through the glass, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. White flowers cascaded from every surface. Roses, lilies, orchids, filling the air with a fragrance so thick it was almost overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, catching the light and scattering it into 1,000 tiny rainbows. The tables were set with fine china and silver flatware. The champagne fountain was already bubbling in the corner. And the cake, a 6-tiered masterpiece of fondant and sugar flowers, stood on its own pedestal like a monument to excess. This was the wedding Vanessa had dreamed of. This was the wedding that had cost Ryan everything. $50,000 in debt. His parents' trust. His financial future. All of it invested in this single day. Ryan stood at the altar in his rented tuxedo, watching the wedding planner direct florists and caterers with military precision. His best man, a college friend named Derek, stood beside him, scrolling through his phone. Nervous? Derek asked without looking up. No, Ryan lied. You look nervous. I'm fine. Derek shrugged and went back to his phone. But Ryan wasn't fine. His eyes kept drifting to the ballroom doors. The massive, ornate double doors through which 200 guests would soon enter. Through which Claire would enter. If she came, Ryan still wasn't sure she would actually show up. Her 3-word response, "I'll be there," had told him nothing about her emotional state. Was she angry? Heartbroken? Had she moved on? Did she know about the inheritance yet? The uncertainty was eating him alive. But Ryan didn't have much time to dwell on it because guests were starting to arrive. And with them came the performance of a lifetime. The ballroom filled slowly at first, then all at once. Vanessa's family arrived in a loud, cheerful group. Her mother already crying happy tears, her sister snapping photos for Instagram, her father looking uncomfortable in a suit that was slightly too tight. Ryan's parents came next. His mother hugged him stiffly, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. His father shook his hand and glanced around the ballroom with an expression Ryan couldn't quite read. Disapproval. Or calculation. Ryan's father had always been good with numbers. He was probably tallying the cost of every flower arrangement, every champagne bottle, every hour of the live band setting up in the corner. "This must have set you back quite a bit," his father said. It wasn't a question. "It's worth it," Ryan said, forcing a smile. "It's our special day." His father's eyes lingered on Ryan's face for a moment. Then he nodded and walked away to find his seat. Ryan's mother leaned in close. "Are you sure about this?" she whispered. "It's not too late to." "I'm sure, Mom." He wasn't sure at all. But he couldn't admit that now. Not with 200 guests taking their seats. Not with Vanessa somewhere upstairs in the bridal suite, putting on her $3,000 Vera Wang dress. Not with the minister standing at the altar, Bible in hand, ready to bind Ryan to this decision forever. The clock on the wall read 2:47 p.m. The ceremony was scheduled to begin at 3 o'clock. 13 minutes. Ryan's eyes went back to the ballroom doors. Still no sign of Clare. Maybe she wouldn't come after all. Maybe she had decided to stay away, to protect herself from the pain of watching her ex-husband marry the woman he had left her for. That would be the smart thing to do. The healthy thing. But some part of Ryan, some small guilty part, was disappointed. Because if Clare didn't come, he would never get the chance to talk to her. To apologize. To make things right before she discovered the full extent of her inheritance. The clock ticked forward. 2:51. 2:54. 2:57. The wedding planner gave the signal. The string quartet began to play. And Ryan turned to face the aisle, his heart pounding in his chest, his palms slick with sweat. This was it. No turning back now. But Ryan had no idea that Clare was already in the building, that she had been there for an hour in a private room on the floor below, putting the final touches on her transformation. And in exactly 4 minutes she would walk through those doors and destroy everything. Vanessa appeared at the end of the aisle like a vision from a bridal magazine. Her blonde hair was swept up in an elaborate updo. Her dress, that $3,000 Vera Wang, hugged her figure perfectly, the train flowing behind her like a river of white silk. She was smiling. Radiant. Triumphant. This was her moment. The moment she had been planning for months. The moment she would finally become Mrs. Ryan Dalton, with all the status and security that came with it. She took her first step down the aisle. The guests turned to watch her. Cameras flashed. Her mother was crying again. Ryan watched Vanessa approach and he tried to feel something. Love. Excitement. Joy. But all he felt was that same heavy dread. That sense of something terrible about to happen. Vanessa was halfway down the aisle now. 20 feet away. 15. 10. And then the ballroom doors opened. Every head in the room turned. The string quartet faltered, their bows stuttering across the strings before falling silent entirely. Vanessa stopped mid-step, her bouquet trembling in her hands. And Ryan felt his heart stop. Because the woman standing in the doorway was not the Clare he remembered. The Clare he had thrown out into the blizzard had been heavy, exhausted, broken. She had been wearing a worn coat and old boots. Her hair had been unwashed, her face pale and tear-streaked. She had been someone he could dismiss. Someone he could pity. Someone he could forget. But this woman was a weapon. Clare had lost at least 40 pounds in 6 weeks. Her body was lean now, strong, sculpted by hours of training and fury. Her dark hair was styled perfectly, falling in glossy waves over her shoulders. And her dress. Ryan recognized designer fashion when he saw it. The dress Clare was wearing cost more than everything in this ballroom combined. It was emerald green, clinging to her new figure like it had been painted on. It was elegant. It was powerful. It was a declaration of war. But it was the jewelry that really made Ryan's blood run cold. Diamonds. Real diamonds. A necklace that caught the light and scattered it across the room like a challenge. Earrings that matched perfectly. A bracelet that costs more than his annual salary. This was not costume jewelry. This was not cubic zirconia from a department store. This was wealth. Real, undeniable, impossible to fake wealth. Clare had found out about the inheritance. She had claimed it. And she had come here to show Ryan exactly what he had lost. Clare stood in the doorway for a long moment. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Every eye in the room was on her. Every whisper, every gasp, every sharp intake of breath. All of it was for her. She could feel the shock radiating off the guests like heat from a fire. She could see Vanessa's perfect smile crumbling at the edges. And she could see Ryan. Poor, stupid, terrified Ryan. His face had gone white. Completely bloodless. Like he was staring at a ghost. Good, Clare thought. Let him be afraid. Let him finally understand what it feels like to be powerless. But Clare wasn't alone. Behind her, 2 men in expensive suits stepped into the doorway. Security guards, hired specifically for this moment, paid to stand there and look intimidating. And beside Clare, a third figure entered the room. A distinguished man in his 60s, carrying a leather briefcase. Robert Peterson. Senior partner at Peterson, Harrison and Associates. The attorney who had helped Clare claim her inheritance. The attorney was about to destroy Ryan's life in front of 200 witnesses. Clare took her first step into the ballroom. Her heels clicked against the marble floor. The sound was sharp, deliberate, like a countdown. She strolled, savoring every moment. The guests parted before her like the Red Sea before Moses. He could hear the whispers now. Who is that? Is that his ex-wife? Oh my God, look at her. Those diamonds have to be worth a fortune. Clare reached the center of the room and stopped. She was now directly between Vanessa and Ryan. Between the bride and the groom. Between the fairy tale and the reality. And when she spoke, her voice carried through the stunned silence like a blade. Thank you for the invitation, Ryan. Her tone was pleasant. Conversational. As if she were commenting on the weather or complimenting the flower arrangements. I'm so glad you wanted me here to celebrate your special day. She paused. Let the tension build. Let Ryan squirm. Because I have some news to share with everyone. And that's when Ryan realized, with horrible crystal clarity, that this wasn't a reconciliation. This wasn't Clare coming to terms with her new life. This was revenge. And he had walked directly into the trap. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. 200 guests sat frozen in their seats. The string quartet had stopped playing entirely, their bows hovering over their instruments like they had forgotten how to move. Vanessa stood paralyzed in the middle of the aisle, her white dress suddenly looking less like a bridal gown and more like a surrender flag. And Ryan looked like a man watching a car crash in slow motion. Knowing the impact was coming, knowing it would be devastating but completely unable to stop it. Clare drank in his fear like fine wine. 6 weeks ago this man had laughed while she wiped spit off her face. 6 weeks ago he had watched her stumble into a blizzard with their newborn daughter and felt nothing. Now he was going to watch his entire world collapse. And Clare was going to enjoy every second of it. 6 weeks ago, Clare began, her voice calm and clear, I stood in the kitchen of the house I had shared with this man for 7 years. I had just given birth to our daughter 3 weeks earlier. I was exhausted. I was vulnerable. I was trusting. He paused, letting the words sink in. And that morning Ryan handed me divorce papers. No warning. No conversation. Just papers slapped down next to my breakfast while our baby cried in her bassinet. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ryan's mother pressed a hand to her mouth. His father's jaw tightened. But Clare wasn't finished. Not even close. And then, she continued, this woman walked out of my bedroom. She turned to look at Vanessa. The blonde bride flinched like she had been slapped. Vanessa was wearing my husband's shirt. She had been sleeping in my bed. In my house. While I was downstairs feeding our newborn daughter. The murmurs grew louder. Someone in the back of the room said, "Oh my God." But that wasn't the worst part, Clare said. The worst part came when I tried to speak. When I tried to understand what was happening. When I tried to ask why. She took a step closer to Vanessa. The bride stumbled backward, nearly tripping on her expensive train. That's when Vanessa walked up to me, a woman 3 weeks postpartum holding her baby, and spat in my face. Gasps erupted throughout the ballroom. Vanessa's mother let out a strangled sound of horror. Even some of Vanessa's friends were staring at her with new expressions. Shock, disgust, disbelief. And Ryan. Clare turned back to face her ex-husband. Ryan laughed. He stood there and laughed while his mistress's spit dripped down my cheek. Ryan opened his mouth. No words came out. He looked like a fish drowning in the air. Then he told me about the money, Clare continued. Our joint savings account. The $15,000 we had been saving for years. For emergencies. For Emma's future. For our life together. She shook her head slowly. Ryan transferred every cent into his personal account at 6 o'clock that morning. Before I even woke up. He stole our daughter's future to pay for this wedding. She gestured at the flowers, the champagne fountain, the 6-tiered cake. All of this, the venue, the decorations, the designer dress, all of it was bought with money he stole from me and our baby. The crowd erupted. People were talking over each other now. Ryan's father stood up from his seat, his face red with anger. Vanessa's mother was crying, but not happy tears anymore. And Ryan just stood there, frozen, broken, caught. But Clare still wasn't finished. Because she hadn't even gotten to the best part yet. Robert Peterson stepped forward. His presence commanded immediate attention. Something about the way he carried himself, the authority in his posture, the confidence of a man who had spent 40 years in courtrooms. He opened his briefcase with practiced precision. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. "My name is Robert Peterson. I am the senior partner at Peterson, Harrison and Associates, and I am here today as legal counsel to Mrs. Clare Morrison Dalton." He pulled out a sheaf of documents. "I am also here to make a formal announcement regarding Mrs. Dalton's legal status." The crowd quieted. Everyone could sense that something massive was coming. "Mrs. Clare Morrison Dalton," Robert Peterson continued, "is the sole heir to the Morrison Family Trust, established by her late grandmother Eleanor Margaret Morrison." He paused for effect. "The current value of this trust, including all assets, properties, stock holdings and controlling shares in Morrison Manufacturing and its subsidiaries, has been assessed at approximately $2.8 billion. The reaction was instantaneous. Screams. Shouts. The sound of Vanessa's bouquet hitting the marble floor with a wet thud. Someone knocked over a champagne glass. A woman in the third row actually fainted, sliding out of her chair while her husband scrambled to catch her. But the loudest sound came from Ryan. A single word. Barely a whisper. "No." Claire smiled. That cold, terrible smile she had been practicing for 6 weeks. "Yes, Ryan. That letter you found on the kitchen counter. The one you opened after you threw me out. That was Mr. Peterson's office trying to reach me about my inheritance." She took another step toward him. Ryan backed up until he hit the altar. There was nowhere left to run. "My grandmother left everything to me," Claire said. "But there was a condition. The inheritance would only be released when I had a child of my own. She wanted to make sure the Morrison fortune went to someone who understood family." He let that word hang in the air. Family. The thing Ryan had destroyed. "The morning you kicked me out," Claire continued, "was the morning I became eligible to inherit $2.8 billion. The morning you stole $15,000 was the morning I became one of the wealthiest women in America." Ryan's legs gave out. He collapsed into a chair at the altar, his head dropping into his hands. His shoulders were shaking. Whether from sobs or shock, Claire couldn't tell. She didn't care either way. But Claire still wasn't done. The inheritance was only part of her plan. The smaller part, actually. The real destruction was still coming. "Mr. Peterson," Claire said, her voice steady and cold, "please inform the guests about the legal actions we've initiated." Robert Peterson nodded. "Certainly, Mrs. Dalton." He turned to address the crowd, holding up the documents he had removed from his briefcase. "First, we have filed a civil lawsuit against Mr. Ryan Dalton for theft of marital assets. The $15,000 he illegally transferred from their joint account will be returned with interest, plus substantial punitive damages." Ryan made a sound like a wounded animal. "Second, we have filed a lawsuit for fraud. Mr. Dalton initiated divorce proceedings without disclosing that he was already cohabitating with another woman, which is illegal in this state. This will affect the final divorce settlement significantly." Vanessa's face went pale. She was starting to understand that this wasn't just about humiliation. This was about consequences. Real, legal, life-destroying consequences. "Third," Robert Peterson continued, turning to look directly at Vanessa, "we have filed a civil suit against Ms. Vanessa Chin for assault and battery. Spitting on another person constitutes battery under state law. Ms. Chin will be hearing from the police shortly." Vanessa made a choking sound. Her hands flew to her mouth. Her mascara was already running, black streaks cutting through her carefully applied makeup. "I didn't," she started. "There are witnesses," Robert Peterson interrupted. "Mr. Dalton's lack of objection to the act makes him a potential co-defendant. We are evaluating additional charges as we speak." One of the security guards stepped forward. He was holding a manila envelope. "Ms. Chin," he said, his voice flat and professional, "you've been served." He handed her the envelope. Vanessa took it with trembling hands. She didn't open it. She just stared at it as if it were a bomb about to explode. And in a way it was. Claire let the chaos wash over her for a moment. The shouts. The cries. The frantic whispers. 200 people are watching 2 lives fall apart in real time. It was beautiful. But she still had one more bomb to drop. The biggest one of all. "There's one more thing," Clare said, and somehow her voice cut through the noise, silencing the crowd once again. Something I've been saving for last. He turned to Ryan. He looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes. Tears were streaming down his face. His tuxedo, the rented one because he couldn't afford to buy, was rumpled from his collapse. He looked like a man who had already lost everything. But he hadn't. Not yet. Your marketing firm, Clare said. Harrison Creative Partners. You're very proud of it, aren't you, Ryan? It's the one thing in your life you built yourself. Ryan stared at her. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. What did his job have to do with any of this? Your biggest client, Clare continued, is Northbridge Shipping. They account for about 40% of your firm's revenue. Without them, you'd have to lay off half your staff. Maybe close your doors entirely. Ryan's face went even whiter. If that were possible. I did some research, Clare said. Northbridge Shipping was acquired by my grandmother's company in 2018. It's a subsidiary of Morrison Holdings. She paused. Let him connect the dots. Which means, she said slowly, savoring every word, I own the company that pays your salary. Ryan's mouth fell open. This morning, Clare continued, I made a phone call. As of 9 a.m. today, Northbridge Shipping has terminated their contract with Harrison Creative Partners. Effective immediately. The sound Ryan made wasn't quite human. It was a howl. A keen sense of absolute despair. His biggest client. Gone. His career was destroyed. Everything he had worked for, ripped away in a single phone call. And you, Vanessa, Clare said, turning to the trembling bride. I'm told you also work at Harrison Creative Partners. Junior associate in the marketing department. Vanessa nodded, her body shaking. You're fired too, Clare said. Consider this your notice. Vanessa collapsed. Her legs gave out and she crumpled to the floor in a pile of white silk and shattered dreams. Her bouquet rolled across the marble, scattering petals like confetti. But Clare wasn't looking at her anymore. She was looking at the room. At the 200 guests sitting in stunned silence. At the champagne fountain still bubbling pointlessly in the corner. At the 6-tiered cake that no one would ever cut. One more thing, Clare said, and her voice softened just slightly. This venue, the Riverside Plaza Ballroom, is owned by a subsidiary of Morrison Holdings. I own this building. She smiled. The rental fee you paid, Ryan, the $8,000 you couldn't really afford, I've donated it to Hope House Women's Shelter. The same shelter that took Emma in 6 weeks ago. When you threw us out into the snow. Ryan lifted his head. His eyes met hers. And for the first time, Clare saw something other than fear in his expression. Recognition. Finally, after 7 years of marriage and 6 weeks of transformation, Ryan was seeing who Clare really was. Not the fat wife he had discarded. Not the broken woman he had dismissed. But something powerful. Something dangerous. Something he should never have crossed. Clare reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She held it up so the crowd could see the screen. And it was a photo. Ryan and Vanessa are kissing in Clare's kitchen. Vanessa is flashing her engagement ring at the camera. And below the image a text message. Thanks for the wedding fund, fatty. Enjoy the streets. This text was sent to me, Clare said, 3 weeks after I gave birth. Hours after I was thrown out of my own home. While I was walking through a blizzard with my newborn daughter, not knowing if we would survive the night. He put the phone away. I've had 6 weeks to think about this message. 6 weeks to heal. 6 weeks to lose the weight. Not because you made me feel worthless, but because I wanted to feel strong. 6 weeks to learn about my inheritance. And 6 weeks to plan exactly how I would respond. He looked at Ryan. Then at Vanessa. Then back at the crowd. Congratulations on your wedding day, Ryan and Vanessa. I hope you enjoy explaining to your 200 guests why the ceremony is cancelled. Why you've both lost your jobs. And why you'll be spending the next several years in court. She turned to leave. Her heels clicked against the marble floor. The final. Like a judge's gavel. But she paused at the door. One last look over her shoulder. Oh, and Ryan, you should know, the first thing I did with my inheritance was set up a trust fund for Emma. She'll never want for anything. She'll never be vulnerable the way you tried to make me vulnerable. Clare's eyes went cold. She'll never need you. And with that, Clare Morrison Dalton, billionaire heiress, and the woman Ryan Dalton had laughed at while she walked through a blizzard, walked out of the ballroom. And out of his life forever. The silence that Clare left behind was heavy enough to crush bone. For a long time, maybe 10 seconds, perhaps a minute, no one moved. The string quartet sat like statues. The guests stared at the empty doorway where Clare had stood. Vanessa lay sobbing on the floor, her expensive dress ruined, her face buried in her hands. Ryan remained slumped in his chair at the altar, staring at nothing. His mind was a blank white noise of panic. $2.8 billion. The number kept bouncing around his skull like a rubber ball. Clare. His Clare, the woman who clipped coupons and worried about the electric bill, was worth almost $3 billion. And he had thrown her away. Not just thrown her away, he had humiliated her. He had stolen from her. He had laughed at her. And in return she had destroyed him. Completely. Totally. The realization hit him slowly, then all at once. His job was gone. His reputation was gone. His savings were gone. He was $50,000 in debt for a wedding that wasn't happening. He was facing multiple lawsuits he couldn't afford to defend. And the woman he had left Clare for, the exciting, vibrant, ambitious Vanessa, was currently sobbing on the floor, fired from her job and facing assault charges. Ryan looked at his parents in the front row. His mother was crying quietly into a handkerchief. His father was staring at him with an expression Ryan had never seen before. Disappointment, anger, pity. "I think," his father said quietly to his mother, his voice carrying through the stunned silence, "our son just made the biggest mistake of his life." Ryan closed his eyes. Outside the window, the sun was shining on the harbor, bright, cheerful, utterly indifferent to the wreckage inside the ballroom. Somewhere out there, Clare was getting into a car. Somewhere out there, Clare was going home to a life of unimaginable wealth and freedom. And Ryan was left here, in the ruins of the life he thought he wanted. Outside the Riverside Plaza, the air was crisp and cold, but not like the blizzard 6 weeks ago. This was a clean cold. A fresh start. A black Mercedes was waiting at the curb. The driver opened the back door as Clare approached. Inside, Maria was waiting with Emma. The baby was awake, her blue eyes wide and curious, watching her mother slide into the seat beside her. "Did it go well?" Maria asked softly. Clare looked at her daughter. At the tiny face that looked so much like Ryan's, but with none of his cruelty. She reached out and stroked Emma's cheek. The skin was soft and warm. "It went exactly as planned," Clare said. She felt something settle in her chest. Not quite peace. The anger was still there, burning like a pilot light, but something close enough. Closure. Justice. The feeling of a debt being paid in full. "Where to, Mrs. Dalton?" the driver asked from the front seat. Clare looked out the window at the city. New York. Her city now. She thought about the house she had shared with Ryan. She had already arranged to sell it. The proceeds would go to charity. She thought about her grandmother's old apartment in Queens. She would keep it, turn it into something meaningful. A foundation office. A memory. But for now, home, she said. Not the house with the memories of spit and betrayal. Not the shelter with the thin mattresses. Home was a penthouse in Manhattan with views of the park. Home was a nursery filled with light and toys. Home was a place where Emma would grow up surrounded by love, security, and the knowledge that she came from a long line of women who didn't break. As the Mercedes pulled away from the curb, Clare Morrison Dalton allowed herself a small smile. The fat wife Ryan had thrown into the snow was gone forever. In her place was a woman who had learned the most important lesson of all. The best revenge wasn't anger. It wasn't vindictiveness. It was simply becoming so powerful that the people who hurt you could never reach you again. Clare leaned back against the leather seat and closed her eyes. The car merged into traffic, carrying her away from the wreckage of her past and toward a future that belonged only to her. And as for Ryan and Vanessa, they were just characters in a story she had finished writing. Clare took a deep breath. And for the first time in a long time she felt truly free.